Home taxation, what it means for you. Owning a home has long been seen as one of the most stable and secure foundations in life. For many families, a home is not just a roof over their heads, it's identity, stability, memory, and the result of decades of work, sacrifice, and planning. But there are signs that the way the government views home ownership is changing. And the change is quiet, it's gradual. It's happening through small policy discussions, consultation papers, and financial forecasts that rarely make the headlines. Yet the impact of these changes, if implemented, would be felt by millions. This isn't about one single tax policy. It's about the UK government now looking to homeowners, not just workers, as a key source of future tax revenue. And that has major implications for anyone who owns a home now or hopes to one day. So in this video, we're going to break down what is being considered, why it's being considered, who would be affected, and what this means for the future of home ownership in the UK. Let's begin. The government is facing a financial reality that is difficult to ignore. The UK is currently spending 1 in every £10 of taxpayer money just servicing debt interest, not paying down debt, simply servicing it. At the same time, public services require more funding. Inflation has made everything more expensive, economic growth is weak, and productivity remains significantly below expectations. When productivity is weak, tax revenue is lower. When tax revenue is lower, the budget gap grows. To fill that gap, the government has several choices. They could cut public spending and reduce the size of the state, but the current Labour government has shown little political appetite for that. There is strong speculation surrounding a third option, taxing assets, particularly property. Property is seen as a stable and reliable source of revenue. It can't be moved offshore, it can't disappear overnight, it can be easily valued and recorded. This is why homes are now being looked at differently, not as purely personal spaces, but as taxable assets. And this is where the changes begin. 1. Potential council tax revaluation. Council tax bans are still based on property values from 1991. A home that has doubled, tripled, or even quadrupled in value since then is still taxed as if it were worth its 1991 price. The Treasury has been reviewing whether council tax should be updated to reflect current values. If this happens, homes in the higher bands, particularly bands G and H, could see their council tax bills rise sharply, in some cases doubling. This would particularly affect homes in London and the South East, properties that have appreciated significantly over time, and families whose income has not risen anywhere near as fast as house prices. And there's a very important group here that is often overlooked: asset-rich, income-poor households. These are not investors or landlords, these are ordinary people, often older, who simply bought their home at the right time in the right location. They worked, saved, bought decades ago when prices were lower, and over the years, the housing market rose around them. On paper, their home is now more valuable, but their income, often a pension or limited wages, has not risen at the same pace. For these households, a sharp rise in council tax is not just inconvenient, it can be the difference between staying in their home or being forced to sell it. That's why revaluation is not just a technical adjustment, it's a shift in how property is viewed, from being a place of life, family, and memory, to being treated primarily as a taxable asset. So, what would the repercussions be? First, financial pressure on long-term homeowners. Many households would suddenly face council tax bills that are hundreds, if not thousands of pounds higher each year. For pensioners and lower-income families, this money simply doesn't exist in their monthly budget. Some would have to cut essentials, others would have to take on debt, and some, in the most difficult cases, may feel forced to sell their home just to stay afloat. Second, it could trigger unplanned movement in the housing market. When people are pushed to sell because they can no longer afford the tax on their home, it creates downward pressure on certain local markets, especially in areas with high concentrations of older homeowners in historically high-value regions. In some communities, you could see a quiet reshaping of who can afford to live there. Third, there would likely be political fallout. Council tax revaluation has been called the third rail of British politics because while it may appear technocratic on paper, it affects people's sense of home and security. And voters remember when a government makes life harder where they live. If bills rise sharply, there will be anger, particularly among older homeowners, a group that votes in very high numbers. This is why the debate has now moved beyond technical policy papers and into the national conversation. What began as quiet discussions about council tax modernisation is now being framed in the press as a broader shift in how the state intends to tax property. And the language being used is no longer neutral. It's emotional, it's charged, it reflects growing anxiety that the government is preparing to go further, from revaluing council tax to introducing entirely new forms of property taxation. That fear has been amplified by recent headlines. The Mail on Sunday ran a striking headline that captured the tone of the national debate. Rachel Reeves's mansion tax raid plot. Class war plan will punish hard work and aspiration, say critics who warn nothing is safe from Labour. At nearly the same time, The Telegraph published its own headline. Chancellor eyes up mansion tax as she takes aim at the middle class. Both reports point to the same concern, that Chancellor Rachel Reeves is preparing to target homeowners with new taxes to plug the growing fiscal hole in the government's finances. This year has been extraordinary for the number of leaks and speculative reports surrounding the housing market and potential tax changes. In the lead up to any budget, there's always speculation, but this year it's been unusually high. In August, The Times and The Telegraph both carried reports claiming that Reeves was considering a new property tax on houses worth more than £500,000. That proposal, though unconfirmed, sent ripples through the market. It was described as a potential replacement for stamp duty and council tax, transforming them into a single continuous annual levy based on the property's current market value. Under that leaked framework, rather than paying tax only when buying or selling a property, homeowners would pay an annual charge linked directly to their home's value. In short, it's a shift from taxing transactions to taxing ownership. A home worth £500,000, for instance, could have been subject to an annual levy, a move that would impact far more than just the rich. It would pull in a large portion of middle-class homeowners, particularly in London and the South East, where average property prices already exceed that threshold. While that particular autumn budget rumour has not been confirmed, it set the tone for what many economists are calling the government's asset-based approach to taxation, taxing wealth tied up in property rather than income. Reeves, who has repeatedly pledged to ensure that those with the broadest shoulders bear more of the tax burden, appears to be taking an asset-based approach to taxation. The latest and most widely discussed leak is the so-called mansion tax. According to multiple reports, Chancellor Rachel Reeves is actively considering a new annual levy on high-value homes as part of the upcoming budget. Under the proposals, the owners of properties worth £2 million and above would face a charge of 1% of the amount by which the property exceeds that value, meaning that owners of a £3 million property would face a bill of £10,000 every year. Supporters argue that this is a fair way to raise revenue without cutting public services or increasing income tax for working families. Critics, however, see it as a dangerous precedent, a class war measure that punishes aspiration and destabilises confidence in the housing market. Property experts condemned the policy as a blunt and crude instrument which would distort the housing market and disproportionately affect older households, affecting older homeowners who are asset-rich but cash-poor. Many retirees who bought homes decades ago, particularly in London and the South East, now find their properties worth over £1 million on paper. However, their actual income is often modest, and an annual charge of thousands could place them under real financial strain. Britain's public finances are stretched thin. The Treasury faces a budget shortfall estimated between £30 and £40 billion, and Reeves has politically committed to maintaining her fiscal rules, specifically ensuring that debt as a share of GDP is falling within 5 years. With limited scope to borrow more, taxation becomes the only path left to raise funds. The challenge is that property wealth in the UK is highly concentrated. According to ONS data, roughly half of all property wealth is held by the top 10% of households. The top 1% own homes worth millions, while middle-income households, especially in southern England, own homes that have appreciated massively due to decades of price growth rather than extravagant wealth. That's where the danger lies. Once a new property tax threshold is established, history shows it rarely stays where it starts. Today, the proposed mansion tax targets homes worth over £2 million and above, but if the tax proves successful, there will be pressure to lower that threshold, first to 1.5 million, then 1 million, and potentially even lower. What begins as a tax on luxury properties could quickly evolve into a broad-based property tax on middle-class homeowners. And this is where the issue becomes deeply sensitive. When the government starts taxing not just second homes or investment properties, but the very act of living in your own home, it shifts the meaning of home ownership itself. A home is not a luxury item. It's where people raise children, care for family, build memories, and find security. For many, it represents decades of sacrifice, saving, and steady work. So when taxation begins to treat simply living in your home as if it were a privilege that must be financially penalized, it can feel like being punished for achieving something that used to be considered a basic foundation of a stable life. Another area being looked at is capital gains tax, the tax on selling your main home. Currently, if you sell your main home, you do not pay capital gains tax. This is because the home you live in is not seen as a profit-generating asset, it's where you live your life. However, one proposal now being reviewed would remove that exemption for homes sold over £1.5 million. This would have serious impacts. For example, someone who bought a home in 1985 for £120,000, 1998 for £250,000, 2006 for £450,000 could find that due to rising market prices, the same home is now valued at 1.2 million, 1.6 million, or even more. Under the proposal, if the sale price crosses 1.5 million, the portion above the threshold could be taxed. That means retiring and downsizing could trigger a large tax bill. People could feel financially penalized for simply moving home. The value they plan to use for later in life would be reduced. This changes the meaning of home ownership. It turns a home, something lived in, into something taxed on exit. So the landscape is shifting. Home ownership, once seen as the cornerstone of stability and reward for a lifetime of work, is now being reinterpreted as a taxable asset. At this stage, nothing is officially confirmed. These policies are still speculation, leaks, signals, briefings. But all eyes are now on the 26th of November, when the Chancellor delivers the budget and the direction will become clear. What's been discussed has the potential to reshape how millions of people live, plan, retire, and protect their homes. If you found this breakdown helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts below.